Hello, welcome to my second IB video. I realized that I have a narcissistic cat in my background, but I bought it on Taobao and I didn't read it properly, so I bought this astronaut cat. I just wanted to share this. So if you open it up, if you open his helmet, it's a flashlight. It sounds so cute. Okay, yeah. Anyways, that has nothing to do with the video. Well, in this video, I will be introducing IB to people who are considering on taking the IB or just getting started. Then I will share with you guys some of the studying tips I used to get the score that I got. And finally, I'll end with some conclusions, some regrets, and a final message. So please watch to the end. What is the IB? Wikipedia says it better than me, so IB is graded from a 0 to 7 scale, 0 being the lowest and 7 being the highest, although I believe 0 means turning in nothing. Generally, IB students take 6 subjects, 3 higher levels and 3 standard levels. HLs and SLs are distinguished by their difficulty, so HLs tend to have more topics within their subjects, and they also go more in depth within certain topics. In addition, higher levels have more teaching hours, and their questions tend to be more challenging than SL. Your final exam and your internal assessment determine your final grade. Internal assessments, or IAs, are internally assessed, and their form depend on the subject. So, for example, sciences are often written reports. I believe visual arts and design are like projects, and languages are oral assessments. In addition to taking 6 subjects, all IB students are required to complete CAS, TOK, and EE. CAS is community service, TOK is theory of knowledge, where you have to do a 10-minute presentation along with writing an essay, and EE is extended essay, where you basically write on a topic of choice. These core subjects provide 3 bonus points, and so altogether, the maximum mark a student may obtain in IB is 45. Should you take the IB? So I will not say yes or no because I don't want to dictate your choice just because of my own experience. So rather than me telling you whether or not you should take IB, I will tell you what you should expect going into IB, and based on that, you can determine whether or not IB is fit for you. First and foremost, to what extent high school is going to be challenging depends on you. I know there's a lot of articles that claim that IB is one of the hardest curriculums out there, but I would argue that AP or A levels, they all have the potential to be just as hard. If you are naturally a high achieving student, you will go out of your own way to choose challenging subjects or spend more time studying. As a result, your high school experience is going to be hard. But if you're someone that's looking to just achieve an average score, or you have a lot of commitments outside of school, then you might choose easier subjects. Your high school workload might be lighter because you will want to choose their easier routes. Your high school experience comes down to your values and your goals. However, I will mention that IB is challenging not just content-wise, but time-wise. Because your final grade doesn't just depend on your final exam, but also your IAs and your EEs, you're going to find yourself spending a lot of your time outside of school working on those. Performing well in IB means consolidating many skills, including organization skills, critical thinking, perseverance, and your academic skills, many of which you can develop throughout your DP years. In other words, you don't need to be an academic genius in order to do well in IB. As long as you have the determination and the willingness to put in the time and effort, you can do well in IB. What subjects should you take? If you already have a major, like a field in mind, choosing your subjects shouldn't be as hard as you make it to be. But I can still understand why many of you may still be anxious about this question, because I was in a similar situation going into grade 11. When I spoke with my academic counselors, they all told me that US universities want to see students take the hardest subject. So I chose higher level physics, higher level math AA, and higher level chemistry, which were the hardest courses provided at my school. I chose those subjects despite the fact I knew I wanted to go into a major that concentrated around biology. And as a result of that decision, I had to also study for my AP bio exam on top of my IB workload, which made my high school experience a lot worse. So the moral of my story is just to go with your gut when choosing subjects and choose subjects that make sense. For example, if you want to major in econ, you should take econ, as well as subjects that will support it, such as psychology or business. And if you're having a trouble choosing subjects outside of your intended major, for example, English, language and literature, or English literature, the choice you make here won't matter that much because you're not going to be majoring in English anyways. If your university has requirements for certain majors, you should probably follow those too. Now moving on to my studying tips. The first tip, I would say also one of the most important tips, is to find your motivation. Your motivation will act as your fuel to keep you going during your DP years. This motivation doesn't have to be that profound. It can range from a school award to your university goals. But the thing about this motive is that it can't be something you determine for yourself. Most people recognize their motivation after facing some form of trauma or an obstacle during their learning journey. So for instance, for me, second semester of grade 11 was the hardest. After I watched my grades fall, I reflected upon why exactly I wanted to do well in high school. And I realized that my driving force is my family. So every time I felt down or demotivated, I just think about that goal and I'm able to persevere. And this leads me to my second tip, which is reflection. In regards to studying, without reflection, you will continuously make unintended consequences that will leave you nowhere. So it is really important that you're reflecting upon your strengths and weaknesses throughout your high school period. The most crucial time to reflect is after taking an assessment. Parallel your studying habits to the grades you get. If you notice that during more past papers or textbook problems actually helping you, then adjust your studying schedule to incorporate more of those type of questions. And the earlier you do this, the faster you will come to understand yourself as a student, as well as what type of study techniques works effectively on you. Reflecting is not just limited to your studying habits, but you should also be reflecting upon yourself as an individual. Based on my own experience, students who live with a victim mentality fail to recognize their own faults. And this is where motivation comes along. Motivation and reflection come hand in hand. You need to reflect in order to find your motivation, and you need to be motivated in order to reflect. And once you're able to reflect and find your driving force, you will naturally want to change yourself for the better. My third tip is on studying techniques and studying schedules. Regardless of what Pinterest, YouTube, or Instagram might show, you don't need aesthetic or super clean notes and studying schedules in order to do well in IB. A super famous example of this is the Pomodoro technique, where you're incorporating timelines into your studying schedule. Trust me, I have tried every technique out there, but none of them worked for me. You see, I'm a very persistent student, so whenever I come across a question that I can't solve, I will do everything to solve it, even if it means contemplating about it for the entire day. Especially for math and physics, so a question or two can sometimes take me 4 to 5 hours to do. Incorporating timelines into my studying schedule just never worked for me. So instead, I adapted myself to studying a certain amount of hours every single day. For example, during the weekdays, I would dedicate 4 hours to studying, straight after school. And then during the weekend, I would study for 8 hours. And don't get shocked. You don't need to study for that long. In reality, I gave myself plenty amount of unplanned breaks within those studying periods. So realistically speaking, I'm probably studying for 5 hours during the weekends and 3 to 4 hours during the weekdays. And obviously this will vary with the type of assignments. The breaks I take within those studying periods are small activities. So small activities are activities that don't require a lot of energy and won't break your studying momentum. So examples of these are, at least for me, are eating, watching small YouTube videos, texting friends, or listening to music. Once you're done with everything on your checklist, you're free to do whatever you want. But it's really important to note that during the studying period, you're finishing everything in one go. You can't just be studying for a little bit and then going outside, doing some like big activity, like playing a video game, watching a movie, or going outside, and then coming back to studying. That's because once you've completed that big activity, you would have used so much energy that you're more likely to want to take more breaks. And what ends up happening is you'll find yourself taking more breaks than intended. This will come with practice. So once you create a habit of dedicating certain hours like per day to just studying, even after you finish everything by that 8th hour or the 5th hour, you would want to fill the rest of that period with studying in order to feel satisfied, which is really helpful because you can use that extra time to revise older topics, which ties on to my next tip, which is revise your older topics. From the day you start learning content in class, there's a very good chance of that being in your exam. So do not underestimate the importance nor difficulty of certain topics. So before my mocks, I created like this Excel sheet where each tab was dedicated to a certain topic or a subject. But I made it in a way so that it was very easy for me to see like every single topic and subsection. So every time I finished my studying period, before I can do whatever I want, I would go onto the Excel sheet, give myself like mini heart attacks and remember, oh yeah, that topic exists. And then I would take that topic and I'll reread it over again or do some exam style questions related to that topic. 5th tip and my last tip is your mental health. I can tell you all these tips, but in the end, it is your choice whether or not you take them in. But if you are not in the right mindset or you're currently going through something, adapting yourself to effective studying tips will be really extremely hard for you. So if you believe that you are currently suffering through a mental illness, seek help. And even if it's not as severe, you should never choose to bubble up your own feelings because chances are there's a lot of people in your grade that are going through the same thing as you. Finding the right person to talk to is an excellent way to release your stress and redirect yourself into the right direction. So I've received a lot of DMs asking for tips on IAs, EEs, and TOKs. So I'll also quickly touch upon them as well. My first tip for IAs, EEs, and TOKs is you don't need to read hundreds and hundreds of exemplars. The whole point of reading exemplars is to just get a feel of what an IB, EE, TOK, and IAs are like. Whenever you read exemplars, you should be looking for how that student was able to reach all the criteria so that you can do so too. Which leads on to my second tip, which is choose topics that you're passionate about. So I don't know how well I did in my IAs and my TOKs, but I do know I did well in my EE. And the main reason being I was passionate about my topic. My favorite artist is Peter Bergerol, and I wrote about him. Prior to writing those essays, I read a lot about him. I visited museums to see his artworks. I read about most of his famous artworks. As a result, I knew my topic really well. And once you understand your topic really well, you'll develop a good sense of what's considered good writing related to your topic. And obviously, you can't just rely on yourself. You need to talk to your mentor, your supervisors, and your teachers to make sure your judgment is right. In the end, if you put your best effort into that final draft and you believe that final draft is the best it can be in the most non-biased way possible, it's probably a good writing. And just submit it so you can move on and focus on other things. Finally, before I end this video with my final message, I'd like to share my regrets. My biggest regret in high school would probably be doubting myself. Since a young age, I'd always convinced myself that no one thought I am capable of performing academically well. As a result, I grew up with a pessimistic and doubtful mindset. But after receiving my scores and noticing people's reactions, I realized that the only person who was surprised by my score was myself. Like everyone around me saw my score coming except for myself. In hindsight, I realized that doubting myself has kept me from so many opportunities, and one being my college applications. Because I want to go into medicine, Johns Hopkins was my dream school. Well, Johns Hopkins, UCLA, or an Ivy League. So during my college applications, I convinced myself that I didn't have a chance at Johns Hopkins, so I didn't apply. And the only reason why I applied to UCLA was because I didn't have to write anything extra. All I had to do was like tick a checkbox, and so that's why I applied. And so in the end, I was lucky that I got into the school that I wanted to go to, but this isn't always the case. So for everyone watching this video, don't doubt yourself. I recognize that like most of the tips I gave in this video are probably not a surprise to anybody. And you see, I wasn't the perfect student. In fact, a lot of the things I did before exams would probably be condemned by many. For example, I was playing Animal Crossing during distance learning. I was watching Netflix while I was working. I was on my phone a lot, probably more than any other time. But in the end, things ended up just fine. There is no perfect recipe how to get a 44 and above. Perhaps for you, creating pretty notes will work for you, or having multiple breaks within your studying schedule is better for you, or having strict time schedules is something you prefer. But in the end, we're all very, very different, and we have different studying habits. But if there's anything to take away from this video, and something that's shared among all of us students and will undoubtedly have positive effect on all of us, are to find your motivation, to reflect, and to improve your mental health. Because once you find your motivation, you will want to reflect on your self-esteem, which in turn will improve your mental health. And once you reflect on your strengths and weaknesses, you'll naturally want to look for studying habits that will work for you. And obviously there will be days when you feel defeated, or you face a failure, or you want to quit. But when it comes to those moments, I would cope with them by looking myself at a wider lens. I would recognize my previous accomplishments, and doing that geared myself into having a more positive mindset, and it pushed me into wanting to live more in the present, and most importantly, made me want to seek ways in order to improve myself as both a student and an individual. That's it. That's all the tips I have, the tips I use to get a 44. I lost the recording for this part of the video, so I'll summarize what I had said. I will add in the description box below a link to the Excel sheet I mentioned in my video, and in the Excel sheet you'll find some free resources I used for studying. I'll also include a free sample of my chemistry notes, and if you're interested in more, you can let me know via Instagram DMs or under the comments below. Bye!
Preferably in a residential area.